Let's say in the present day, your household is earning over $500,000 a year, and you're doing a lot of the right things in preparing for retirement, contributing to workplace retirement plans. Maybe you have a brokerage account that you're contributing to and investing, and generally holding cash for emergencies and things like that. And if you started to do any kind of research into retirement planning, there's a decent chance this concept of what's called a Roth conversion has popped up somewhere along the lines. Spoiler, if it hasn't, no worries whatsoever. So what is a Roth conversion? Why is it something that higher income households might consider as they are approaching or entering retirement? Why would one actually think about doing or implementing a Roth conversion strategy? When might be an optimal time to consider implementing a Roth conversion? In this video, we'll highlight and answer all those questions, essentially showing what impact a Roth conversion can have by showing a fictitious sample financial plan, and again, addressing the ins and outs of what a Roth conversion is and why you might consider doing one in retirement. So for starters, what is a Roth conversion, a Roth IRA conversion specifically? And the very simple idea is you're taking assets from a pre-tax account, like a traditional IRA, and moving them to a Roth IRA, a post-tax account. A reminder, IRAs are bucketed into two common types. There's pre-tax, traditional IRAs, and also Roth IRAs. The simplest way to describe it is that a pre-tax or traditional IRA is money that has not had taxes paid on it yet. A Roth IRA, by comparison, those funds have had taxes paid on them. And so the flip side of both of those is when you go to withdraw from a Roth IRA, you don't pay any taxes as long as certain requirements of the account are met. By contrast, a traditional IRA, you do pay taxes on those withdrawals, specifically ordinary income taxes. That difference is very important when it comes to retirement planning, and we'll get into why here in a second, but a lot of it just has to do with planning around taxes in retirement. Tax planning in general is one of those things in retirement that doesn't really get brought up as much, but it can be super important to the overall success of a financial plan and by extension a retirement plan as well. Think of it this way, if you are able to save tens of thousands of dollars in taxes over the course of your entire retirement, not only can you potentially spend more in retirement, but also if there are market downturns or things like that, tax planning can add a slight edge, providing benefit to retirees over the course of their retirement. So a common example I see of this is a household that's maybe in their mid-50s. They're earning $500,000 to $600,000 or more as a household. They're obviously paying a lot of money in taxes as a result of that. But in tandem with that high income, they're also doing the right thing in making retirement plan contributions to their workplace retirement plans. Maybe they're investing outside of those plans as well into things like brokerage accounts or health savings accounts, or making what are called backdoor Roth contributions into Roth IRAs as well. Within those workplace plans, they're typically making pre-tax contributions, and the idea behind that is that they are essentially reducing their taxable income during those working years when they're in those high tax brackets. The idea of a Roth conversion then comes when they are fully retired, or they're, for whatever reason, might be in a lower income year. They take assets from those pre-tax accounts, they were contributing to them in higher income years, convert those assets into Roth accounts when they are in lower tax bracket years, ideally in retirement or again in a lower income year. And in doing so, are paying taxes on that converted amount, but they're paying those taxes at a much lower rate than they would be while they were working. One of the things people overlook or don't really think about is when those near years or early years of retirement, let's say ages 60 to 70 hypothetically, your income can more or less be in many ways what you want it to be. If I don't make withdrawals from a 401k or a pre-tax IRA, I try to mitigate taxes in brokerage accounts I might have. I can use assets to keep myself in the low tax brackets, or to think of it in a different way, control the tax bracket as best I can that I am in those early retirement years. If I can do that, I can then convert assets from those traditional IRAs or a 401k or something like that to effectively set what my income will be by determining what that conversion amount will be. I can then convert IRA assets in those lower income years, paying lower tax on the converted amount, and thereby essentially create what we call tax arbitrage. So why would someone even consider doing a Roth conversion? Like I just mentioned, you're withdrawing funds from an IRA, you're converting it to a Roth IRA, and you're paying taxes on that in that year. Why would I willingly want to pay more in taxes today? Couldn't I just keep that money invested and let it grow over time? And this gets to the core of why might one do a Roth conversion. When I think about retirement planning specifically, one of the concepts I like to instill in clients is thinking about diversification. Often that comes to diversification when it comes to investments specifically. If I hold a certain percentage of large cap stocks, for example, maybe I offset or have some other percentage of holdings in mid cap or small cap or in fixed income or alternative investments or real estate holdings or whatever the case may be. I don't have all my eggs in one basket. I'm diversified out broadly to where if some certain asset class is impacted negatively in the markets, maybe other asset classes are doing better or not as negatively impacted as the one that's experiencing that downturn. The same general concept can be applied to the tax nature or tax implications of various investment accounts that you hold. When you think about going into retirement, you're going to be withdrawing from a variety of different account types to more or less fund your lifestyle in retirement. Typically, that's some combination of an IRA, a Roth IRA, a brokerage account, an HSA, health savings account, maybe some combination of other real estate assets, a pension, Social Security will be thrown in there at some point, maybe a business holdings that you have that are kicking off dividends. All of these things work in tandem together to fund trips around the world or for buying a second home or what have you. The trade-off, though, is that there's also tax implications for each of those various asset types. And in this instance, a pre-tax IRA and a Roth IRA both have drastically different tax implications like we discussed. So what could the actual impact of doing this Roth conversion be? Let's flip over here a second to look through that. So here we have a use case of this whole Roth conversion concept in action. I'll touch on a couple things here in the actual projection, and then I'll get more into the weeds on it here in a second. But this is Joe and Jill's sample. Joe is 56, Jill's 51. They're both still working, and their household income is around $575,000 a year. They're contributing to retirement plans through work, so things are going really well. You can see that their portfolio assets are projected to grow over time as they head into retirement here in 2035. And so one of the things we look at is to say, well, within all of this planning, what does cash flow look like in retirement currently? You'll see a few things. Again, these are their working years up through age 65. They both retire. And this is these golden years I was throwing out, or prime years in which to consider a Roth conversion. Income drops from over $730,000 a year down to basically whatever they need to live off of, which it projected out in the next 10 years is about $226,000 a year. In the present day, it's much lower than that. Inflation, unfortunately, comes for all of us. So in these early years, they can dictate what they want their income to be, as long as it's enough to meet whatever their lifestyle needs are. We'll touch on this towards the end, but one of the things we are always looking at is to note that this is when required minimum distributions start for Joe when he turns age 75. And the thing that you note is this huge jump in expenses. And really, that doesn't necessarily mean that their expenses for lifestyle costs will go up overnight. It's essentially that their expenses, including taxes, will go up overnight, where they're taking this huge RMD. It's more money than they need to live off of, but they have to take it or they're penalized. So basically what they end up doing likely is just taking the funds and reinvesting it into a brokerage account or something similar, and really just having to pay the tax, unfortunately. It's one of the reasons we'll look at here for doing a Roth conversion. One of the other things we always like to look at is just total taxes and then the tax bracket that they are in currently as well. So we'll kind of condense the view here over the next 20 years of being in these higher brackets, just a little bit into that 35% bracket there through their working years. And then when they retire, brackets drop to basically zero because they're living off of kind of whatever they deem to fund lifestyle expenses. It could be a brokerage account. They could try to keep their tax implications fairly low during that time frame. This is when, again, RMDs kick in here. And you'll note that it kind of starts to tick up over time, essentially because the percentage that you have to withdraw from your IRA increases each year. That RMD will increase in tandem. And so by the time they're in their 80s and early 90s, it gets to be very, very expensive. We'll talk about IRMAA surcharges here in a second, but I'm going to kind of show some of the additional costs that come with doing these conversions. But the flip side being that there's tax benefit to be had as well. This is filling the 22% tax bracket over a 10-year period while in those early years of retirement. So we open a Roth IRA for Joe, and we start that conversion process over that 10-year time frame. You'll see immediately we start to have tax implications because we're filling up that bracket to the best of our abilities over this 10-year time frame. In addition, we have IRMAA surcharges, so there's costs to doing this. I think that's an important piece of all of this. We'll look back here at cash flow. It's not going to have too big of an impact, and this is all in future values. We'll put it in present just because we'll remove inflation just so the numbers don't look insane. But basically, you can see that the benefit is that we drop these RMDs pretty substantially. And if I flip it off, we'll watch the RMDs jump back up to here with this much higher expense over time. This is when Jill starts her RMDs. You'll see it jumps from kind of this flatter number here to even higher later on in retirement. The added benefits, I think, of doing these, a couple things. The taxes, we're looking at taxes. I'll mention this several times, but you look at taxes across the course of someone's entire life, not just next year or that very first year of retirement. You'll see that by doing these conversions, it's a pretty substantial tax savings for the two of them. Even though the overall success of their plan that's not necessarily a material change, the savings cumulatively of taxes over the course of their lives is almost $400,000. Index for inflation, that would be much higher. And in terms of kind of just value added, you can see it's almost $6 million just by tax savings and tax-free growth of that IRA as well. And we project out to age 100 for all clients, just because people are living longer, and obviously we want clients to live long, fruitful lives. And that's further shown when we go to just total lifetime portfolio value, really addition, and I'll toggle off. This is kind of the original screen we saw. This is just assets in general, and as they kind of go through life, they're spending those assets down somewhat. We can see that the Roth conversions projection that we ran shows a very helpful increase of around 6.5 million almost in value gained over that person's lifetime. The flip side that's important, I think a lot of people overlook, is that there's a break-even point to this. We'll touch on this here in a second again with kind of pros and cons of this. But if I start this strategy in 2035, you'll see that there's years where my net worth is negatively impacted because I'm paying a lot in taxes. I'm reinvesting the funds into the Roth. So there's some pretty significant dips. And then at least for this projection, based on underlying projections for the investments in the accounts and the tax savings, that really break even for Joe and Jill is around 79 and 74 respectively. And it starts to kind of creep up from there. It's really only though in those later years that we see that benefit, but it takes a decade to see that. So I think that's an important kind of piece of all this calculus and analysis, is that it's not just tax savings. It's not just diversification of assets from a tax perspective. It's not just estate planning and the benefits that a Roth IRA can have over a traditional IRA. So when ideally would one consider doing a Roth conversion? I think there's a couple of different scenarios where this commonly comes up. The first and foremost is if you have a low income year or series of years. Let's say you're 55 and you're starting a business. Maybe you've built up a large balance in a pre-tax IRA or a 401k. Theoretically, you could convert funds in those years where maybe you've quit your job, you're starting your business, your income is next to nothing, and take advantage of those lower income years to convert assets from, again, those pre-tax accounts to a Roth account. The more common one, and I think often more advantageous one to consider, is those early years of retirement. If someone retires at the age of 60, they have 5 years until Medicare kicks in. Maybe they have 5 to 7 years until they start considering Social Security distributions or start taking Social Security. And so in those years, they can really have a better control over what their income will be. And if you can do that, you can essentially determine, if I want to start a strategy or approach of converting, hypothetically, $50,000 of IRA assets per year over a, let's say, 5 to 10 year period, that's a very easily plannable number to then determine what those amounts will be. Or there's a much more kind of in-depth approach of saying, what brackets do we want to fill up to convert these amounts over? Maybe it's filling the 22% bracket, for example, over a 5-year period, whatever that dollar amount might be, and then supplementing the remainder of kind of whatever your lifestyle expenses are with, again, other income streams you might have, or some sort of taxable assets, a taxable brokerage account that you might have as well. All right, what is the catch? There's lots of considerations I've thrown out, or at least just described the strategy. Why might one do a Roth conversion, a Roth IRA conversion? When might be an ideal time to convert that? And again, showcasing that in a financial plan. But what are kind of the limitations or just considerations around doing a Roth conversion? I think there's 4 big ones. First and foremost is what we call the IRMAA trap. IRMAA stands for Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It is a mouthful. Essentially, it is a surcharge on Medicare premiums based on your income, on like a cliff schedule, if you will. It's almost like its own tax bracket, essentially, where if you are making a certain amount as a household, your Medicare premiums are adjusted, potentially increased with a surcharge based on whatever that income might be. The surcharge itself is based on a calculation of the prior 2 years of income that you might have. The wheels are potentially turning now. If you start Medicare at 65, they're looking back over the last 2 years when you were 63 and 64. If you're working still, this is less of a consideration, but just importantly, I think it's something to think about. And as you're thinking about Roth IRA conversions especially, you might think of, well, if I retire at 60, then especially those early 60s years might be really advantageous to do larger conversion amounts to then ideally circumvent or reduce IRMAA surcharges at age 65 based on income for ages 63 and 64. Are IRMAA surcharges something to completely cancel out doing a Roth IRA conversion? I don't think so. I think it's important to really have a good analysis of what are those additional costs going to be, and essentially running like a pros and cons or a cost benefit of, if I have to pay an additional $3,000 in surcharges as I'm doing these Roth IRA conversions, is that worth it to me based on whatever growth or tax benefit I will get on the back end of having that larger balance in a Roth IRA? The second major consideration I think that's important is calculating or running a projection around what the break-even date of doing the Roth IRA conversion will be. In doing a Roth IRA conversion, to be clear, you are paying taxes on the converted amount you're doing each year. If I convert $100,000 in a given year, that's $100,000 of additional income that I have to pay taxes on. And that's a cost that you have to kind of weigh within this decision-making process. The flip side of that is once the funds are in the Roth IRA itself, it can then be reinvested. Sometimes we might invest it more aggressively just because we know we're not going to use those funds for a longer period of time, potentially. Maybe the cost, if you will, of those taxes is then offset by that additional growth over some period of time, and also the benefit of making those withdrawals from the account without paying taxes on it. That's additional benefit as well. I don't think there's any magic number here. I think it can vary widely by whatever investments are underlying within the accounts, the asset allocation of the accounts as well. But it's an important consideration to make. I've seen projections where it could be 7 to 8 years where there's a break even, could be into your 80s where there's a break even of doing the strategy. And I think that then calls into question, is it worth doing in general? And really it just takes some good planning and analysis to answer that question and ultimately decide what the optimal approach will be for you based on what that answer is. I described it earlier, but having cash on hand to pay the taxes for these conversions is also super important. If I do $100,000 in conversions in a given year, it's typically not advantageous to then withhold 20% for federal and state taxes, for example, on that converted amount, because then I'm only converting $80,000. It's better to ideally have cash on hand to convert the full $100,000 and then come April of the next year, pay taxes on that, or have to have the cash on hand in that quarter if you make estimated payments to then pay the estimated tax payments in that quarter that you do the conversion to make sure you're not caught off with penalties for missing estimates on that higher income amount. That's an important consideration as well. One of the larger ones, I'll say, is just that in general, the benefit of having a Roth IRA conversion is that you are able essentially to reduce required minimum distributions from your IRA. We touched on this earlier in the illustration. But in general, one of the things we sometimes find for those who are retired who have huge concentrations of their wealth in pre-tax accounts is that essentially in your later years, maybe your late 70s and especially into your 80s and 90s, your RMDs or required minimum distributions are so large that they're almost in excess of what you need to live on. And people will just literally take the money, pay the taxes on it, and then reinvest it because they just don't need it. And if there's ways to circumvent that or get around it, a Roth IRA conversion is potentially something to do that with. So this is a lot to consider. I think the important elements of this, and I think really just the action steps to consider taking and determining whether this is even a good fit for you, is first getting a really good handle heading on into retirement on what your living expenses and kind of expenses in general are going to look like. What kind of cash flow or retirement income are you going to need to sustain your lifestyle throughout your retirement and really for the rest of your life? If then we can identify what years within that retirement horizon are going to be lower income years, that's when the wheels start turning of, is it going to make sense to do some amount of Roth conversions within that year or within that time frame? And then ultimately decide what those dollar amounts will actually be for that given year. If tax code changes, maybe that changes as well. But in general, mapping out and planning and saying these 5 years are going to be optimal for Roth conversion amounts. We're then going to supplement with cash we have on hand for lifestyle expenses, things like that, to be as tax efficient as we can be. When are we starting Social Security? That's going to impact us in terms of what brackets we're in, what our total income looks like for the household, what amounts we are then converting for our IRA as well. We're also thinking about IRMAA surcharges. And finally, I think it's just also looking from an estate planning perspective. Is a Roth IRA something that's going to be beneficial for my spouse who maybe will survive me, for my children to inherit, if these are assets that I'm really not going to need regardless? And I think there's kind of a near optimal answer. And I think it's just figuring out what's going to be a best fit for you and planning for kind of what you want out of your retirement and really more broadly for your financial plan. Roth IRA conversions can create a lot of tax efficiencies in retirement. They can be a little scary, I think, thinking about taxes in terms of a lifetime expense instead of something I'm trying to reduce or mitigate in the present year. It's just a different way of thinking about retirement planning and investing and things like that in general. But one, I just think that it's so important to map out and incorporate as part of an overall retirement plan and more broadly a financial plan as well. As always, I'm Scott Sturgeon, Senior Wealth Advisor and founder at Oread Wealth Partners. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.